Hello, welcome back to Tiny Artist TV. For today's video, I'm going to be returning to form once again one of my favorite series to work on, the Saturday morning shuffles, and I haven't done them in a while because I've been busy with other projects, but I wanted to go ahead and do a Saturday morning shuffle, and I actually want to use this one as a lighting and shading tutorial video. I'm going to be using the Draw It app, which is what I've been using for my other Saturday morning shuffle videos, basically because there's like a huge number of like different prompts and types of things that you can choose from. So for this one, there is one that does have randomly generated lighting type. So I'm gonna go ahead and shuffle that. So it's under, I don't know how well you can see this. I'll probably take a screen cap and like put it on the screen so you guys can see it better. There's a tab called Still Life, and this one actually has a randomly generated lighting section. So I'll go ahead and shuffle that and then screen cap, and I'll have it on screen so you guys can see what I'm doing. And it looks like we're gonna be working with flashlight lighting, which is fun. It's a very bold choice. And then for the character, I'm just gonna do a fantasy character because that's what I do. I do sci-fi, fantasy, mostly type stuff. So for the color palette, I am gonna go back to my home away from home, coolers.co, and just pick a number on the top of my head. Let me go ahead and pull that up for you guys. All right, so yeah, I'm thinking 25. Oh, this is such a pretty palette. This is very beachy though. Let me go ahead. Let's do Hi, me again. I've changed shirts. It's a few days later. I've tried drawing this prompt several times now. I don't like the color palette. I don't like the way the sketch is working out. So I'm going to change the color palette, and hopefully it can change my attitude about the way this video is going. So I'm going to shuffle this 5 more times, and hopefully I can get something that I actually want to work with, because that other color palette was awful. So it is still a shuffle, but a shuffle my way. Yes, this is better. I can work with this. Okay. In addition, I've also decided to roll up a new prompt, because again, the sketch was just not going in a direction that I was going to try to force myself to make peace with. So here is the new prompt with a new color palette. The lighting is the same. I may interpret it slightly differently because this is a fantasy setting, so I may just still have it be like a singular strong light source, not necessarily a flashlight, but something flashlight adjacent. So here we go. Initially, what I planned on doing for this video was just going ahead doing the sketch, the line art, and the base colors off screen, and then just coming back with that finish so I could just focus on showing you guys how I handle the lighting. But I do want to show you, at least at this step, how I map out my lighting plan in the sketch. So before I even touch any kind of color, if I know I'm going to have a strong light source, usually what I'll do is, for instance, in this picture, it's going to be this crystal ball sitting on the desk here. So you can kind of see these two circles where I've got where the light is going to bounce out. I've got this stronger circle here, so I know that this area here in the sketch is going to have the most intense lighting situation, which is going to be this green, yellow, white kind of lighting over here. It's kind of like Disney villain green, which I thought was really appropriate for this type of character. And then out here, where the line is a little softer, that just indicates to me that you will still see some of that green light reflected beyond the character. It just won't be as strong because the light source is further away. And then you're also going to have a shadow in between these two layers, separating where the character is blocking that light. And again, when I come back, this will all be lined and have flat color, and then I will just explain how I am mapping out the lighting with different layer styles, such as like multiply layers versus overlay layers, because they do different things. They have different intensities of effect depending on what you're going for. And basically, you could also just, maybe slightly more, I don't want to say advanced, because advanced doesn't feel like the right word, but a more painterly technique, being able to just kind of understand the color well enough to just pick the color off the color wheel. So I will be using a combination of those effects, layer styles, and then just overpainting to communicate where the light is going to be the strongest and the lightest, and how it bounces off of different textures, because we've got skin, we've got bone, we've got stone. I don't have any hard metallic surfaces. I may end up adding something metallic just to kind of show that, like maybe putting a shield on this back wall here. And then I have this arrow here to indicate where my shadows are going to be strongest. So we have the shadows coming from one side of the canvas, and then of course we have our light source coming from the competing side of the canvas. So there's going to be pretty much a gradient of dark to light going in this direction. And then I do also have another circle over here to indicate to me in my mapping out that this section is also going to have some light. It may not be as strong because it is farther away from the light source, but there is still going to be some green on the surface of that skull when it comes to finishing this drawing. So next time I come back, this will be all completely flatted, and we'll just dive into how to handle lighting for digital painting. Okay, here is the completed flat version of today's prompt picture, which was the Orc Necromancer. Let's go ahead and get started with the lighting. What I normally do to start is I will actually turn off the color layer and any other background layers that I have on, so I can get back down to see where I have the sketch mapped out. I'll create a new layer for my lighting, and then I will just sort of trace out here on this line where that light is going to most heavily fall. It is going to fall on some other raised surfaces, such as this forearm here and the back of the knuckles here, and actually maybe a little bit right here too. Let's see where the face is going to. It's about right about here. So you got to think about where everything is falling. So of course the shoulder is going to be in full light. You're going to have a little bit of this shadow here created by the hand where it's crossing over. You're going to have light here and the finger up to about here, and then it's actually the back of the knuckles. It's not going to quite reach all the way. So what I'll usually do in that case, stylistically, I like to do kind of a half tone, but we'll get to that in a second. So this just kind of helps me fill out some areas that are outside of where I have the initial mapping light. And then I'll just take this whole section, go around, and then fill that in. And then I'll go back in, and I do this for my shading too, but I'll go back in and carve out the areas of shading. So we want to remember, because usually the way I handle shading, I have to kind of switch my brain and do this the opposite way. I'm leaving the darkest parts colored in. For lighting, you want to leave all the parts where the light is showing, obviously. There is going to be a little bit of diffusion towards the edges, so I'll just kind of map that out here. There's not going to be any light here because it's behind the nose. So we'll go in rough to start. There's going to be here, hidden by the shoulder, this little bit here, under the nose, a little bit in the middle, the top of the lip here, the back of the teeth, the back of the lip, the chin, under the cheekbone. And if you want this to be like exact, you can, use references to see how the lighting is falling on the face. But for just kind of a quick crash course just to get you thinking in the right direction about how light plays off of surfaces, this is good enough. So once I've figured out where I want all of my lighting and shading to go in terms of this vivid light source here, I will turn my colors back on, and then that way I can see how the lighting is interacting with the colors that I have and can adjust it accordingly. For this type of light source, I have, and I've kind of already done this off screen just to speed things up a bit, set to vivid light. I have this green, yellow picked here because you can see the layer. If I turn this off, this is just the true color of the layer, but you can adjust the layer to match more closely the type of lighting you want. So you can see here, this is much more of this yellow green that's in the crystal ball and the potion here in our color palette. And then I can just go back in here with either my India ink or my watercolor brushes and just clean up some areas where I may not have seen where the color is slipped through. And I can also make sure that the shading is blending a little bit better. Up here, it's looking just a little bit rough, so we'll just kind of soften that out a little bit. Let's see. And then you can also see here, it looks like white light because of how it's interacting with the gray. I don't necessarily want that. So here's what I'm actually going to do. What I'm actually going to do, I am going to cut this section out. And I'm going to handle this section of the painting in a different way. So what I want to do for areas like this, where I still want the color to be kind of very vivid, a little more true to what is happening with the rest of the character, I will just go in with a little bit of math, a little bit of color math, and hand paint the lighting in. So this is where you have to know a little bit of color theory. It's not super complicated, honestly, it just takes a little bit of practice. Say for instance, our base colors, our light is green, the skin is blue. Well, actually, we're not working with the skin. We're working with the gray. So our light is green. The canvas here is gray. That's basically going to give you this yellow color, but it's going to be a little bit more dingy because this gray has some blues in it. So it's going to be, we're going to start here because this is where our light is coming from. And then we're going to add in that blue gray. So this is going to give us better lighting than just straight white light. It's going to make it more interesting, but it's still going to show up as green on here. And then you can just adjust as necessary. If it needs to be just a little bit lighter, you can do that. And I'm actually going to add this back into the red because I didn't have any problems with it on the red. It was just the gray that needed a little bit of help. So here, and then you're gonna have the shadow where the bones are falling. So here, you just clean up as you go. The bones, however, because those are a harder surface, there's going to be less softening of the light source. I think I actually am just going to use the neon green for that. Probably be a lot cleaner if I zoomed in, huh? So this, anywhere we have bones, there's going to be a break in the light. So now because we have a green underneath, when we add the green back on, it just looks better. soften that a little bit. Just want to blend that in with the green underneath. And that's more of a stylistic choice than a realism choice. And so now, because we have the harsh light in the front and then it dithers towards the back, you can see how this looks more like flashlight. Now that we have our character taken care of, I'm actually going to start a different layer for the background lighting. I'm going to move this up so I can see this line out here. I'm going to create a new layer up here, and you don't have to create a new layer every time. It's just a lot more forgiving if you create separate layers for your lighting. And we're going to take that green again. I actually am going to color pick it from my wheel this time. From my palette. And for the background, I'm going to take the airbrush and just have this really big, nice full brush to work with. And I am going to go just like this. And I'm going to work my way back in, making it softer. So it's going to be strongest here, and then it's going to come out. And because we have some texture on the bricks, I'm just going to go ahead and handle that. And then I'm actually going to increase this, make that brighter. And then I do need to go back under here and fill that in. And then we're just going to go back in and clean up those edges here on the table. It is going to be on the chair. So I'll have a little bit of lighting here. And I'm thinking for this, I might end up setting it to overlay. Let's just see what that looks like. Because of the way it works on brick versus flesh, I think I actually am going to like that better. The main thing I'm showing you guys here is different layer styles, how to pick which setting you want for what type. If I go with hard light, I actually really do like that, because this is, again, it is a hard light, it is a vivid light source. It's not too different from just leaving the layer normal, but what it allows the colors underneath to do is to come through and play with that color. So this is where we are for now. And now that I can see where everything else is blending, this is very harsh. So I'm going to bring this down a little bit. Yeah, I like that much better. And then that makes more sense with the color that we picked with that gray green. So I'm going to turn this back off and then keep working with the background. According to our sketch, we are mostly finished with the lighting. I still have to add the lighting to the skull here. And there was this soft circle in the front. So because, again, this is furthest away from the light, what I'm going to end up doing, I'm going to go back to the vivid light layer. I'm going to make sure I'm picking the same light. We're going to just create that semicircle in the front. So this is where our light is going to be diffusing from. The harshest parts are going to be here, and then it's going to gradually get lighter and lighter. So we have a little bit of highlight here, a little bit probably on this backbone here, on the bridge, the socket is going to have a little bit of light in the back corner of the socket. Teeth are mostly going to be in shadow. The back end of the teeth here. A bit of the nose. We're going to have some highlight on the outer section here and on the bridge of the nose. And then we're going to soften behind the nose, behind the brow bone, and then under the jaw. To make this more green, we're going to go back to our color pick, make sure that our light is actually green. So we're going to start with the base of this, add in a little bit of that green light, and it's already kind of turning yellow. Initially what I was going to do was to go back in and highlight with this yellow color, but I think it's actually going to end up turning white because of the Laker style that we have active, and we already have white light here, so we don't necessarily need that. So far, a majority of our surfaces have been softer surfaces that can emphasize harsh contrast in light. Where we're going to get most of our contrast is actually going to be here with this mirror, because most of this is going to be in shadow, because this is where our shadows are coming from. So all of this is going to be very dark, and then you're going to have just rim lighting right along the edge. We are going to go ahead. I'm going to do that. What I'm going to do, I want to still use colors from my color palette for the lighting. So I'm going to take this blue, which is the darkest color we currently have. I'm going to go down here to this layer that is, I'm going to leave it underneath of the light, because of course the light is going to be lighter than the shadow and you still want it to show through. And I'm going to go foreground to transparent and just bump this down to a darker blue so that it harmonizes with our color palette, but it's still dark enough that it appears as a shadow. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and turn this to multiply as well. And then I'm just going to drag this to about where the light is going to start melding with the shadow, and then I can just create that good contrast there. And I'm going to create another layer on the top. Let's see, I don't think this has anything on it yet. This was going to be for this, but I'm going to use it for the shadow. I'm going to set this to multiply as well and have this over top of my colors, line, and effects. I'm going to have it over this too, because this is going to be our foreground shading, which is going to be softer than what we have going on here, but still darker than what's going on over here. So this way, this is immediately our strongest source of light, and the light mapping makes more sense with this being the strongest, and then you still have highlights over here, but with everything else kind of being in contrasting shadow. I'm gonna get rid of this little guy here. Delete. Because this is a metal, well, it's metal and glass, which is definitively a hard surface, our lighting is also going to be very high contrast, very hard. So whereas in here, I have used soft brushes to soften out the edges, we're not going to have any soft edges here. We're just going to use a hard brush. And there's going to be, I'm going to do a big swoop here. gonna go in and clean that up just to make it there we go. And then I'm just gonna trace around here. And then I'm gonna do another crisp edge right here. What I should do, not helpful. There we go. So now I can just create a nice crisp edge along here without having to worry about going over this edge here. So we've reached pretty much what is the end of our illustration for today. The last thing I have to do is just put the shadow on the wall back here between these two layers. So I'm going to go back to my multiply layer, pick the shadow color. I'm going to go in with a big brush, bigger than that. Let's do too big. Yeah, this is good. Well, maybe a little bit bigger. Okay. And then I'm just going to go in directly behind where my light source is and just kind of map out where that shadow is going to be. Clean up any edges. Back in, I'm gonna use my watercolor brush just because it has a little bit more control to do the shadows on the table. So that is gonna bring me to my top multiply layer. I'm just gonna have some deep shadows right in the grooves of right in here. This brings us to the end of today's drawing. For our Saturday morning shuffle, we had our Orc Necromancer, who was highlighted by flashlight or something akin to. Again, in this case, it was a crystal ball. I hope this tutorial was helpful. I know it wasn't all inclusive of all different types of lighting, but I think I may actually do another one where I do something more like a sunlight or a moonlight, something that's a little more subtle. But until next time, I'll see you guys later. Have a weird day.